Yeah. Moving from a left brain dominant to integrating the left and the right brain hemispheres. And that's, Ian McGilchrist's idea. I know that's been a huge idea for me. And like, I've never actually read his second book. Maybe that's his third, Matter of Things. But The Master and His Emissary was definitely one of my favorites. Also, it was a tough book to read, but very insightful and insane amount of evidence that he shows there for his argument. There's still people that doubt what he's saying, but the way he argues it is just, there's so much. And it's definitely something I've seen in my own life. Like the left brain dominance. Like for me, I pursued music for a while. So I was a rapper, and that was something that I pursued for a long time. And then that kind of didn't work out. And that led to my kind of existential crisis. And from there, I was kind of rebuilding and also trying to figure out, what is my identity? What is my purpose? What am I going to do? And from there, I got a lot more into like intellectual pursuits and reading a lot and stuff like that. And I actually feel like I became more left brain dominant than before. I was doing music, and it had this kind of aspect of, writing lyrics, but also listening to music and putting it together. And I would get into these immersive flow states for hours. And then, coming and doing more reading and writing and kind of intellectual stuff really felt a lot more like being left brain dominant. And it's still a process for me figuring out how do I balance that? Because there's definitely times where I notice, I'm like, whoa, you're just too focused. You're too zoomed in on something. And and that's when the distress arises.
Yeah. After I came out of the crisis, one of my biggest weaknesses when you work in finance, right? Like finance is about the construction of abstract intellectual futures that basically people will say to you, this is how the world is, or this is how the world is about to be. And they tend to be very, 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 very clever and well argued and internally consistent and coherent. And 99% of them are going to be wrong because the future only works out one way, and legendarily wrong. And I took an enormous amount of self-worth from repeating things that I thought sounded clever, which is dangerous. Like it's, I think you can go really deep down the rabbit hole of understanding how sinister speaking without engaging your heart is. I think it's one of my biggest risk factors in terms of my character, is talking about things that I don't embody, or like repeating stuff just because it sounds really clever and therefore people will think I'm really clever. And the thing that happened after my crisis was I just started to get an embodied sense of what was or wasn't true. And people would tell me things and I'd be like, I can't explain why that seems like bullshit. I just think it is. And like, it's not like I'm some sort of savant now, but that is a skill that can be cultivated. And that's really important because it helps you orient yourself. And reading McGilchrist's stuff, I was like, oh, this is the first time I'm reading a relatively rational theory that actually correlates to everything that I experienced in the woo phases of my existence. That I also believe it's actually true. But it was like, oh, like if you have like some crazy psychotic break, but accompanied with like precognition and synchronicities and all this other stuff that are currently not explained by a materialist worldview, you're either insane and need to be medicated and institutionalized, or you're enlightened. And neither of those are quite right. I think both of them are right, but neither of them are right. And not having a framework to interpret that experience, it makes it much, much harder.
Yeah, the other thing that was coming up was you were talking about how in finance it's all about kind of presenting this sense of certainty, like, oh, I know what the future holds, even though nobody really knows. And that's a left brain dominant kind of thing, because the left brain loves certainty. It's all about grasping and trying to understand and like get a hold of reality. Where the right brain, it allows more kind of ambiguity and uncertainty to be there. So it's interesting how certain professions also are maybe more geared towards a certain functioning. But the other thing too, I definitely resonate with, the repeating or saying things that sound good or influential that aren't necessarily true. Like that's an easy kind of thing to fall into. And I think for my personality also, like I think I've been a fairly articulate person, and then I did rap, and rap was all about kind of performance and like creating an image. So it's very easy to kind of fall into that. And then I came across this practice called circling. Have you ever heard of that?
I've heard of it, but I don't know much about it. Tell me.
Yeah. So, it's a practice that really, it's a relational practice, and it really changes the way that we relate to people. Often we're talking about something else in our relationships, but circling kind of shifts it right to the immediacy and right to the connection between us. And it gets kind of underneath the stories to the embodiment, to the emotions that's here, to the feelings that are here in our relationship right now in this moment. And so getting to do that was just so interesting to see how much rationalizing I had, or how many stories I had, or just kind of these dynamics, these social dynamics that I got so used to playing into. And then getting to learn that practice and practice with other people, it kind of felt like that was also getting into more of integration with the left and the right brain. The left brain also likes to confabulate, like it will make up these stories. And that's a lot of the rationalization that we do is just, it's just a story to not deal with maybe a certain emotion that's underneath there.